Curselock LitRPG Curse Magic Adventure. By Left Right. Chapter 11, Lost. I'm telling you, we are lost, Glennie said to the group. It was well into night at this point, but the group was still in the tall, grassy, soulless savanna wilds. Since their battle with the pride of lions, they had not seen a single monster besides the benign or mundane animal. Even with Glennie's heightened senses, there simply wasn't anything to do but aimlessly wander. If someone hadn't let go of the map, Leland teased, smirking. You know how I get when there's something in my eye? Jude exclaimed. Yeah, you get teary. Do not. Do so. Maybe I do. Leland took his victory with a laugh. If worse comes to worst, then we camp out here for the night. We never got an inn, so we still have our camping supplies. Glennie rolled his eyes at that. You know how I feel about camping out in the open. Jude saw an opening. You get cranky, he said with a smirk. No, I don't. No, he doesn't. His smirk fell. The others laughed. Still, Leland continued. We should probably try to find the town. I don't want to camp out with monster parts stinking up the area. So they got back to walking, their packs full of meaty bloody organs and pelts. Glennie also kept the lion's claws and teeth, stating that he would look into getting a pair of bone daggers crafted later. During the downtime, Leland checked over his grimoire's newest entry. You have assisted in killing multiple monolions. An appropriate reward has been added to your legacy. Fracture has increased to rank 5. Crow Massacre increased to rank 3. Just as he expected, Fracture's % chance to hit went up by 5 and Crow Massacre increased its crow count by 1. Honestly, Leland was a bit disappointed that Curse of Collapse didn't rank up. Despite him only using it once, he thought the situation would have given him more rewards than simply nothing. He shrugged, checking the next page. It was still stuck shut. Putting the grimoire back into his hand, Leland saw the crow tattoo move. It changed its perpetual flight to something more guarded. At least, as guarded as a bird could get. I wonder what? His thoughts were cut off when Glennie gasped. Guys, weapons out, the rogue said, slipping invisible. I smell blood. As a trail of padded down grass left Leland and Jude, they readied themselves. Together they walked back to back further through the savannah. A whistle cut the tense air, both boys jumped at the sound, but then saw an opaque Glennie waving them over. As they neared, they could smell it too. A mangled hunk of meat sat alone in the brush, knife marks and thick puncture wounds all over the muscly mass. Blood was draped around the area, cold and still wet. Leland couched down, picking at the flesh with a pocket knife. Looks fresh, Glennie said. What is it? Jude retorted, his nose scrunched. Human. Both Glennie and Jude turned to look at the speaker. Leland simply shrugged and pushed some of the bits around for the others to see. That's a hand. A foot here. I think this is the face. Leland hooked the mess of skin on his knife, pulling it up for the others to inspect. Glennie gasped again. It's that young master's bodyguard. How Sonryo. The others paled, Leland dropping the severed face like a boiling pot of falling oil. He stepped back, falling over his feet and into the grass. Something wet then splattered across his face and chest. He turned with horror, a detached arm still white-knuckled around a sword sat beside him. He jumped up. Ew. Ew. It touched me. I'm covered in it. Leland started pulling off his parents' birthday gift. Gnarly, Jude whispered. What could have done this? Glennie asked. The lions were nowhere near this level of power. Must be foul play then, Jude said, forcing himself not to smirk at his friend pouring water on himself. What do? We can't just leave him here. Sure we can. Glennie raised an eyebrow, causing Jude to rethink his statement. All right, maybe we can't. Guys, Leland said, now stripped to his undershirt. You two are missing something important. Where is the young master Onryo? Jude pursed his lips, but Glennie's reaction was more extreme. The rogue shut down, falling into a frozen state. Only his eyes moved, twitching, jagged movements. He eyed the dark horizon, the mangled bodyguard, then the trail of blood leading through the straw. Slowly, like a baby first learning to crawl, he opened his mouth. Do either of you recognize where we are? Truly, look around. Leland shook his head, but Jude raised a finger to his chin. Now that you mention it, this place does look familiar. We are at the dungeon, Glennie said simply. Behind it, actually. Leland recoiled, looking around. The longer he squinted at the dark landscape around them, the more the picture began to fill in. A plethora of bushes and an oddly filled tree line. His eyes widened in realization when he saw the building hidden within the brush. Glennie continued. The trail of blood leads around to the entrance. And I suspect we are going to find at least one more body. The guild attendant watching the entrance, Leland supplied. Jude's shoulders slumped. What do we do? At the very least we should check and make sure the attendant is truly dead. If they were bleeding out and we could have helped them, I'll never be able to sleep again, said Leland. Glennie nodded to the notion, activating his invisibility. He led the way, pushing through the tall grass like the very lions they hunted earlier. Coming into view of the entrance proper, a flickering monolight was all there was to illuminate the building's interior. Glennie let out a long breath, signaling the others it was safe. Leland cursed, "My lord, that's a lot of blood." The tattoo on his hand tilted its head, but no one noticed. "Yeah," Jude said robotically. "Too much blood. Trust me, I've killed a lot of things. There has never been this much blood." Red stained the building's walls and ceiling, droplets fell to the hardwood floor, the stench of iron perforated the windows they looked through. As they pushed in, they found the mangled body of the attendant behind a countertop. It was an older gentleman, the fading tattoo on his hand all but confirming the man was not a combatant. "The legacy of the Quill Lord," Leland said, recognizing the feather pen ink. "He was a receptionist, he didn't deserve to be killed like this." "He didn't deserve to be killed at all," Glennie said before taking a deep breath. "The Master Onryo is still missing. There is no body. Hey guys, you should come see this." At some point Jude had stepped further into the building, a set of red boot prints leaving a path. The others followed his voice into the back room. They found Jude standing before a broken open vault door, melting red ice dripped from the mangled hinges. "Someone went in," Jude said, pointing into the vault. "The dungeon is activated." The green shimmering entrance all but confirmed his words. Dungeon portals are typically blue, signifying the dungeon is ready for delving. After entering, teammates had an hour to exit before the entrance closed, turning a deep red. Only one group was allowed in at a time, which only meant one thing. "We are the only ones who can help Onryo." Both Jude and Leland turned to Glennie. The young man gripped his twin daggers with all his might. His breathing was erratic and harsh, a stark contrast to his statue-like face staring at the shimmering portal entrance. "We don't have much time. The entrance will close soon. We need to decide what we are going to do." Glennie hesitated before adding, "I recognize who the killer is." "Who?" Jude asked. "An ice willow." Leland shook his head. "No, that doesn't make any sense. They were all branded witches and executed for their crimes. This can't be a member." Glennie shook his head, tears forming but never falling. "After the funeral for Mom, I overheard an inquisitor telling my dad the youngest son had escaped." "Their youngest son? That means the last surviving Ice Willow is the man who killed my mom," "Yeah," Glennie finished. "And another is about to fall to his hand, if Onryo hasn't been killed already, that is." Leland and Jude glanced at each other, a silent agreement forming. Leland took the initiative. "What do you want to do?" "We will follow your choice. Glennie gave them a shy smile. His fingers loosened and curled around the hilt of his daggers, the gears in his mind turned. "We go in." "Damn right we do!" Jude bellowed, pulling his axe to his shoulder. "I'll take point." And just like that, it was time for their rookie team to delve their first dungeon. Chapter 12, Remembrance. The night before his 19th birthday, Glennie trembled with fatigue. His fingers were calloused and his arms scored with shallow cuts, his shirt was stuck to his chest and back, and his eyes were narrow. He circled his opponent who was still fresh and without a wound. "Longer you wait, the more opportunities you give me," the opponent said, his voice quiet and reserved. That got to Glennie, the small digs. The constant reminder of failure, the constant reminder of her. He charged, one dagger rising into the air while the other stayed low. He twisted after the first stab, reversing the grip on the lower knife before lunging with a long slash. He felt the attack hit, but when he checked his blade, no blood returned his gaze, only his reflection. His red hair, another reminder. Roaring, Glennie pushed forward, his hands dancing with sharpened weapons, stabbing, cutting, blocking, parrying. His daggers bounced off his opponent, each time proving more forceful than the last. Vibrations ran through his fingers and out through his nails. They were bleeding at this point, the strength of his opponent ending the battle before it could truly begin. A sharp pain appeared on the edge of his ear. It started cold and dull, but became an issue as time went on. His blood kept spilling, more and more, soon his whole neck and shoulder was covered in the red liquid. But it was just a small cut, how was he bleeding this much? Never allow yourself to be hit. Even the smallest wounds can be deadly with the powers of the lords. Glennie nodded, taking the stance his parents had taught him as a child. He flew in, whirling his daggers like a madman or a grieving man. Eventually the battle ended, Glennie lost, unconditionally. His father gave him a trying smile, one that was forced not because he proved himself unworthy of praise, but because the sorrow was still too fresh. 2.5 years. When would the memories stop being nightmares? "Good work today," his father said. "Take your time in the dream ceremony, pick what your heart tells you." Those words meant more to Glennie than any training or lecture. From this point on, he was fighting for his own life. Any failure would be his own, not his teacher's or lack of skill. There was no talent in this world, only the fruitful and diligent would survive. "I'm going back to the Inquisitors in 3 days, his father said. "Before I leave, I need you to know something. Something deep in the heart of your hearts, something grander than any lesson. Your mother loved you, more than anything. It was a travesty what happened to her. Please don't fall for the same trick." Glennie nodded along with the words, requoting his father's bitter words from a few days after the funeral. "Never allow yourself to be stabbed in the back. Always watch the enemy. Only trust those who are willing to do the same for you." His father grimaced at the rueful tone, his tone from back when he was angry. "You're going to do great out there, son." Leland watched Glennie carefully. They had only just stepped over the boundary into the dungeon, but the legacy of chameleons was already rearing for a fight. Leland supposed it was possible for the Icewillow to sit by the entrance, but that felt unlikely. Not with a hostage, at least. No, their target would be deep into the dungeon, possibly even at the end. "Remember guys," Leland said. "This dungeon hasn't been cleared in a long time. Monsters' breaks are this area's ode to gold, so the dungeon is going to be overflowing with monsters." All three knew how dungeons worked quite well. Each had researched in their own time about bidding on delving time slots, finding fresh entrances out in the wilds, and even what happened when a dungeon broke. When a dungeon failed to be cleared in a timely manner, the monsters inside had the opportunity to break free, otherwise known as monster breaks. Sometimes, like in Lion Trunk's case, it is appreciated. Other times, whole cities could be overrun and destroyed. Careful monitoring was needed, something the guild took responsibility for. I don't sense anything, Glennie said, causing the team to relax a bit. Each still held their weapons, but took the moment to really look around the dungeon. It was their first time in one, after all. Dungeons were not always like their surroundings. A desert could have a dungeon set in an ocean, a volcano entrance could be in a frozen tundra. This, luckily, was not such a case. While the scenery had changed to a more rocky landscape, the tall, straw-like grass still littered the ground around them. A clear path had been set by the dungeon, one leading through the savanna up onto a cliff face. Closer to the rocky drop-off, the path changed from dirt to wood. Wooden steps and a rickety bridge led up the cliff, eventually stopping at a cave entrance. "Looks like we are going up there," Leland said, pointing. Jude's frown turned deep. I don't do that well with heights. Maybe we should just tell the guild." He cut himself off when the entrance/exit of the dungeon turned red, signaling that if they left, they would not be allowed back in. Jude swallowed. "Never mind." Leland rolled his eyes, his gaze finding a trembling Glennie. "You all right?" "I think so." "Then let's get going. Icewillow has an hour on us." They took the path, Jude leading the charge while Glennie sandwiched Leland into the center of their convoy. They went slowly over the mold-riddled steps and one at a time, crossed the bridges. The scaffolding ebbed and flowed with their weight, but eventually they made it to the cave entrance. When they did, the corpses started appearing. Monolions, dozens of them. Each mangled and covered in frozen blood. Spikes of red jutted from their pelts or embedded through their eye sockets. They pushed through, finding more monster bodies as they went. The cave turned and bent, rose and fell, and eventually opened into a small cavern. At the far end was a raised stone platform, like a bed frame without a mattress. On it, lions were frozen inside a solid block of red ice like a prehistoric glacier with a Neanderthal encased. It was then Leland thought of something. Tentatively, he spoke up, "Are you going to be able to fight this guy?" Jude shared the same sentiment. "I've never seen magic like this before." "What legacy is he?" Glennie knew the answer to one of the questions. "Legacy of the cold-blooded. I don't know everything about his abilities, but he can freeze blood." "Can we do anything to him?" Glennie answered with a hesitation. "If we all attack together, yes. We have to stick to a plan though." Jude shook his head. "If you think the three of us can beat an expert mage, then, sorry for the bluntness, but how did this guy kill your mom?" "It was a backstab," Glennie answered robotically. "He was assisting the Inquisitors against his own house. He was a rat, an informant. He changed his mind, I guess. My mother wasn't expecting it. He attacked when the others were raiding their main mansion. She was tasked to watch him." Leland patted his friend on the back. "We'll get him, don't worry." Glennie nodded, a shimmer catching his eye. Within the red block of ice, a golden orb shone. "Looks like Icewillow is foregoing monster drops. Looks like he's not here for the loot." "What's he here for then?" Jude asked, scratching the back of his hair. Leland answered. "Probably just a place to hide out. If he could go somewhere that no one could follow, he'd be safe. But why make a mess at the dungeon entrance? Now people are going to know that someone came in here, and I'll bet the Inquisitors are not too far behind." That made Leland pause. Onryo. He saw an opportunity. There are always more dungeons. You don't always get the chance to kill a house enemy. Glennie pulled at his tattoo, revealing a handled mirror. He looked at the fogged words before speaking to the others. "Come on, we've spent too much time here." They exited the chamber and headed through another tunnel. Again the path twisted and turned, leading them up and around. Lion bodies littered the floor, each dead much like the previous ones. The trail of corpses told them they were on the right track, which was proven correct when the tunnel led to a set of wooden stairs. They hesitantly went up, finding the cave open to the surface. They poked their heads out and were able to hear the snarls. They were at the top of the cliff, a flat plateau of lush swaying grass. Wind howled through the area, threatening to overshadow the calls of the monolion. It stood, easily eclipsing the average monolion by 3 or 4 times. 2 long fangs stretched out of his massive maw, bone-white compared to the beast's deep amber mane. Streaks of blue floated around its head, mana as its name suggested. What pulled the boy's attention, however, was the 2 men. One young, one older. One battled the great beast, the other shivered in fear. Young Master Onryo was still alive. Chapter 13, Which? Kill or capture? Leland asked, pulling hesitant gazes from the others. I don't think we can capture. Look at how he's fighting the thing. Jude replied, pointing. Icewillow twisted and contorted his lean body, moving around the monolion's attacks. He summoned and moved a frozen puppet of red, making it fight for him as he kept behind it. Together man and construct battled to a stalemate with the beast, finding the lion's agility too hard to nail down. The lion moved with horrid speed, pouncing around the battlefield like a grasshopper jumping from bush to bush. It found momentary refuge in the tall grass, hiding its presence before suddenly appearing mid-lunge. As it attacked, blue motes of mana spiraled about its head like a whirlpool drowning debris. Kill, Glennie said. I don't think we have the luxury to go for anything else. Okay, here's the plan, Leland spoke up, his voice hardly a whisper. We attack from ambush before he can kill the lion. Jude and I force him to react to our attack, hopefully giving Glennie or the lion a chance to kill. Just then, a blue beam ripped the plateau in half. A shockwave and tremble followed closely after that knocked loose the staircase that the boys hid within. Jude spoke up. Or we could try to sneak Onryo out while Icewillow is distracted. Leland agreed, but both looked to Glennie. The redhead frowned, slowly shaking his head. I don't think I could sleep at night knowing I let this man off. Leland wanted to point out that they wouldn't simply let the man off, but he felt the argument wasn't worthwhile. Glennie had chosen, what kind of friends would they be if they failed him now? All right, Leland said aloud. We start. Give us a minute to get into position. Jude and Glennie nodded, the latter of which turned invisible. With the rank of Glennie's ability nearly reaching 10, he almost fully disappeared. If one looked closely enough they would be able to see the small creases along his armor and face, but that was if he was at a standstill. Moving, the rogue only appeared as a second thought. Jude nodded to Leland, causing the mage to throttle his magic. Instantly Icewillow noticed, his head whipping towards the staircase. The ice puppet chittered with fury, rushing to meet the berserker legacy. As ice met metal, Leland's curse completed. Slow. For a heartbeat Leland and Icewillow connected, the former feeling nothing but greed. He wanted everything: fame, money, power, family, revenge. He would use his magic, he would use anything and anyone, to achieve his goals.